Hello, students. This is Coach. We are going to go over our opening repertoire. So, as white, we are D4 players. As D4 players, similar to E4, there are a lot of potential moves that your opponent can make. However, in this particular video, we are only covering responses to D5, making it a Queen's Gambit after we play C4. So, as one of my students, you should be playing D4 every time because you want to keep your play as simple as possible. And so the best way of doing it, especially as you guys are beginners and are first starting out, you need to make sure that you have a consistent move order that you begin with. But you want to master responses to your moves that makes your life easier. So not saying that you run on autopilot, but you don't have to stress as much over at least your first five moves, and your moves are very solid. So let's begin. So D4 should be your first move. We're covering the Queen's Gambit. So Fritz wants to play. No, Fritz, I don't want to play right now. But of course, even Fritz agrees that we should be playing C4. So let's go over some weird, and the biggest purpose of this video is to go over weird responses. So C5 is the first one we'll cover today. This is a symmetrical response. This happens a lot at the beginning of it's a solid opening. It's not like bad, but it's not the most sound response. So after C5, we should take, and usually in a lot of these lines when the pawn is on C5, the majority of responses are going to be C takes D5 anyways, not just this line. Black has a few responses. C takes D4 is just not ideal. Black is already down almost two pawns, so I would say a pawn and a half, according to the engine. But they just lose control of the center. It's not as if black can maintain the D4 pawn. If they could, then this would make good sense. But after queen A4 check, you force black to get in some kind of weird shell. They can block with the queen, the bishop, doesn't matter, but we'll take this pawn afterwards. Let's just say queen D7 because they want to keep an eye on this D5 pawn, try to win it. So that's why bishop D7 isn't as ideal because it's like, well, now you don't even have any pressure on the D5 pawn. So queen D7 makes sense. Queen takes D4. We won't cover lines after this because I just want you guys to master the first five moves. A lot of times we get confused in the first 4 to 5 moves and you're already kind of like at a loss. And that is not what we want to achieve in our opening understanding. You should at least get the first 4 to 5 moves down pack. And then as you get more advanced, you want to master moves 6 through 7. And if you want to be a title player, you want to start getting 10, 12 moves deep. But we got to get halfway. Let's get halfway first. So that's one of the responses, this is the worst ones. If black takes on the third move, if black takes the pawn with the C pawn, you just play check and you win the pawn back, and you just plan on playing E4, just support the D5 pawn. They can't really prevent you from supporting the D5 pawn. At some point, you'll play queen E3 when they play knight C6 at some point. Now, they shouldn't play knight C6 immediately, but you also can play queen E2. But let's move on. So if they take on their third move, let's just start over again. So once again, we're covering the symmetrical, and we always take the D5 pawn. So you should have that down pat. If your opponent chooses to play queen takes D5, which is more sensible, knight F3, they take the pawn, we play knight C3, and we kick the queen back, and we win the pawn. And so this is going to like turn into potentially a quick conversion to the endgame if queens are traded. But we want to take with the queen. Well, it depends on how black responds. But once again, I don't want to get too deep into it. But you're going to win the d4 pawn back, okay? Whether you take it back with the knight or the queen. If they play queen a5, you're going to take it back with the knight, of course, because it's a little bit different. But just know to play knight c3 to kick the knight. Well, not to kick the knight, but to move the queen. Get a development with tempo, okay? If black plays knight of6, we're going to give a pawn back with a sharp move being e4. If knight takes e4, d takes e5. And once again, your main idea is just to keep that pawn on d5, and it limits your opponent can't play knight c6 essentially. So it just cramps your opponent's position. It cramps them in all kinds of ways, but it's just that d5 pawn becomes annoying. So if knight f6, once again, we're covering third moves. Your fourth move is e4. That's good. They take d takes e5. If your opponent doesn't take the pawn, let's say they play c takes d4. I mean, well, it's just that's just bad. I mean, we're not. I don't even cover this in our quizzes because like you should just automatically know that you have a free pawn. I mean, well, your pawn is now free, so I wouldn't understand the purpose of your opponent doing this. It's just bad chess. We don't really. You study tactics, you should be able to get basic principles such as winning free pawns. So I don't think that's really worth investing effort and time into. But if your opponent were to take the pawn on d4, well, you should obviously just take it with the queen. That's it for this symmetrical variation. So basically, take the pawn on d5 and maintain the pawn on d5. Pretty much that simple. Let's do this. Let's go to not the trigger. We're not gonna cover that yet. What's actually very common? I see this a lot. Actually, I see this even when I'm playing online rapid or blitz or bullet play. I do see knight f6 played a lot, and so we do need to have like a consistent response. You don't want to be guessing every time. Just take the pawn. Once again, a lot of times your third move, if your opponent isn't playing like e6 or slaw, like basically all these odd responses, we're capturing the pawn on d5. Your opponent could do this little gambit with c6. Once again, we accept these types of gambits because they're not really that sound. They're playable, but they're not sound. And then you just develop your knight. Like, thanks for the pawn. I may be down a tempo in terms of piece development, but black doesn't have much compensation for it. So just play knight f3. Once again, just play basic, normal developing chess. Develop, control the center, castle, get your rooks developed in the middle of the board. You should be fine. At that point, it's just calculation. And one more thing to note, and this is for all students: you never play an opening to just win an opening. You're not going to win. You should not go into a game thinking you're going to win the first 8 to 12 moves because you're just playing better chess. It may give you an advantage, and your goal is to convert that advantage into a win, whether it be in the middle of the game or the end game. But you should never have your hopes set on just winning instantly in the beginning. That's just you're damaging your psyche. Because if it lasts more than 10 or 10 moves or 12 moves, you're going to start feeling sad, and it's pretty silly to think even at the lowest levels that you're going to win that quickly unless your opponent just blunders like their queen or something. So you play to get the advantage early. So all right, so let's go to the next variation in this subset. So that was the gambit variation. I think we call this the Marshall defense, but I could be wrong. But off the top of my head, I think it's the Marshall when they play knight 6. So we take knight takes. This knight once again, this knight f3. Like our moves don't really change. Knight f3. We don't want to trade with knight c3. We want to really kick that knight back when we can. So they can play g6. They got two main options. Once again, they don't play g6 or g6. Just play normal chess. But what is solid for black should be trying to get some kind of inferior Grunfeld. You guys know what the Grunfeld is if you are one of my students. It's an inferior version, so you're not really concerned. You just play for and you play normal. Once again, develop. Get maybe play h3 to prevent. You don't want bishop g4 to happen, so that would be annoying. So maybe you want to break the principle of developing first, just to prevent your opponent from being a little annoying. Because bishop g4 could cause inconveniences. So after the knight moves, unless it's knight f6, if it's knight f6, then you have to play knight c3. But if knight b6, you can cheat with h3 and save a tempo, preventing your opponent from playing bishop g4. So just once again, let's repeat: take pawn, develop knight f3, and maybe e4 if we get the opportunity. So against g6, e4. Against e6, still e4. Like, guys, this is pretty simple. You're just developing and you're taking advantage of your opponent's weird moves here. I'll call these weird. They're not completely unsound, but these are some weird responses to the Queen's Gambit. So we take advantage by taking the space in the center of the board. E4, D4, and F3. That's the Baltic. Let's see. Is that all for the symmetrical? Yeah, we did symmetrical already. Let's cover. Let's look at that one more time. Yeah, I think we covered everything. Yeah, we covered the weird variation. Okay, so just two responses: G6, E6, still E4. All right, let's do. Oh, let's do. This is not as long as I thought it was. This is actually an hour lot to cover. I'm trying to like looking at this branch. It's not that much. So this is the Baltic. They play Bishop F5. You take the pawn. Once again, guys, this is like almost the third time. You take the D5 pawn. They should take your knight. And so we have this little cool, sneaky move, Queen E4 check. Once again, you guys, we've been covering this in between move. So we get a tempo, make the queen do something. Like if they play Queen E7, well now we take the queen and we just get it. We're winning in terms of a middle to end game conversion. So anytime we get like a pawn up in terms of event, either material or positional, if it's this early, we don't mind trading off. I know I tell you guys a lot all the time, don't trade off, but if you're going to play the Queen's Gambit, you are going to be leaning in this manner that we're playing. It's more positional, so you don't mind just converting early. But if it's a normal middle game where your opponent's playing solid, you don't want to trade because you don't have a significant advantage yet. Um, So this is pretty easy to convert. Take the bishop, develop e4, knight f3, same thing. It should be easy against at least at your levels, this should be easy to convert. As long as you play sound, don't make any blunders, take your time. If your opponent makes the blunder of this, though, they play queen takes d5, knight c3, and once again, that's a free tempo. You get to play e4, now you just keep hitting the pieces. You get to play e4, bishop has to move, then you move the queen out to b3 potentially. Um, just ideas, but knight of 3, 4, just develop. It's not that complicated. Even the ancient it says that you are up by 2. I don't even cover a fifth move here because it's like there's no point. You should know to play e4 after this. Unless they play e6, I mean queen e6. They play queen e6 and d5. Just keep harass the queen until she's back into either her starting position or in a bad spot. So, all right, this is not long at all. I felt like this was a lot longer, but after C4, we're going to cover, let's see. Okay, so this is somewhat normal. I mean, what is normal? This is your most expected response at higher levels. Um, if they don't play knight f6 first, but knight f3, your most common response. C5, now we're in like a Tarrasch. Once again, guys, what do you see the pattern? You're capturing the d5 pawn. E takes d5, g3, and we're in a Catalan setup. We're not going to go too deep into the Catalan at this time. You just need to know how to respond to a lot of these weird Queen's Gambit decline setups that you will be encountering most often. And if you get the first 5 moves right, and if you want to master more, we can go. We can provide it later on. But for now, you need to get the first 5 moves down pat. PACT, not pack. So G3. Let's say, Well, really, there's no other variations in character. Yeah, because this does get pretty deep. We're not going to do that on this video. Yeah. All right. So if they play Tarrasch, which is like they play e6, d5, c5, you just take the d5 pawn and play g3. Of course, bishop g2, castles, so and so forth. Uh, let's do the Albin Countergambit. We're almost done. Um, so you're gonna take. So it's a little different. So I know you usually take the d5 pawn, but that's only if the pawn on c5. So if it's this is kind of like invert it. It's the inverse. So you take the e5 pawn instead because you want to keep taking towards the center, not towards the flank. If you're going to be the initial gambit there, because you offer c4, so you need to capture toward the center. So d4 is the expected response. If you play anything else, it just doesn't make sense. Knight f3, knight c6 is most common. a3 is the best recommendation because it prevents the bishop e4 check and the pans and all that little gimmicky stuff that can get you into trouble if you're not prepared. So this kind of stops with this. I do go 6 moves deep here. Usually they play knight bishop g4 to put pressure on your supported d4 square and the e5 pawn that you have. Knight bd2 and you should be good to go. You're clearly doing better. You just have to kind of like take your time and think it out. Once again, if you master these first couple moves first, then we'll cover deeper branches. But not now. Just get these moves down pat first. So knight bd2. I mean, there's other response like after a3. There's several. They can play bishop e6. They can play. Let's see, bishop f5 also is an option. Knight ge7 with the idea of knight g6 is an option, but we're not going to cover all that. If we can get these first 5 moves down pat, then I feel comfortable going deep because you need to understand what you're trying to do, and as you practice these, it'll make sense why you play these moves and how. On top of why of my explanations. Uh, we covered the Baltic. It didn't take long. Oh, there's actually a little bit more in the Baltic that I wanted to cover here. Here we go. So, let's go to the bishop takes b1 line. So, oh yeah, well we covered this already. Oh yeah, we didn't cover this though. So if they play c6, you take the pawn. Once again, this is another in-between move. And you're threatening c takes b7, check, wolf, winning the rook, wolf promoting as a queen. So you just kind of want a free pawn there. Remember, this is the Baltic. If they play bishop f5, so once again, take. You don't take back. And this is something we've been covering. If you look at our last video, we want to play in between moves. Let's go to knight d7. So we do have to take, there's no in between moves, so we just take. And queen b5. I want you to know that that's a good move to play. The queen keeps putting pressure on black's vulnerable pawns, and it's just in a better spot. So that's if you play against the Baltic and they play a little bit more normal. They take your knight. You play queen f4 check, you block with the knight, and then you just continue to use that queen to apply pressure. So I wanted to come back to that section where I think we only have one more line to cover. That is, yeah, the Trigorin. Okay, yeah, that's about it. So this is very rare. I just even at the beginner, like you guys won't be seeing this, but knight c3. So this is the very rare exception. We don't play knight f3. We need to put pressure on d5 pawn. If your opponent plays d takes c4, that's the main line. You play knight f3. So once again, it's a queen's gambit. We're going to give away that pawn to get an early lead in development. And so this is now more so like some form of queen's gambit accepted, but it's through a Trigorin flavor. So there are quite a number of responses here. This is probably the biggest branch of variations, but we'll quickly cover them. So bishop g4, you just respond with d5, just push. Against e6, you just play e4, controlling the center. If they let you control the center freely, just play e4. So it's really just about how do you control the center. So against bishop g4, You play d5 against e6, e4. Against knight f6, you play bishop g5 because you need to get rid of the knight so you can comfortably play e4. And missing one, e5. Yeah, there's a little gambit. You need to don't be shocked by this. Just push once again. Just push the pawn up. The knight is the only thing protecting the e5 pawn, and it's an avalanche effect because if you take the e5 pawn, then you're threatening the c4 pawn and so forth, and you're also threatening queen a4 check once the knight moves. In fact, more likely the knight's going to go to a5. You play queen a4 check, and they block it, and you take the pawn, and it's a snowball effect. It slowly builds. And if your opponent plays bad, it turns to the avalanche. It's the opposite. All right, so we covered those 4 lines. They also can play e5 early here in this form of gambit. So it's like an Albin Countergambit, just with a Gregorian twist. You take the pawn now. It's the exception because I told you before, you always take towards the center. You're still taking towards the center on this one. It's just you're taking more of on the queen side because we have more support with the knight being on c3 already. And not much else needed to cover here. I mean, you're clearly winning. If they play symmetrical with e takes d4, well, you're going to win the symmetrical battle here. Because just look, I mean, you're with check, you have the tempo ahead. King takes, you get another tempo by taking here because they take. If you get the queen first, let's say, and then they take. Well, no matter how they take the pawn anyway. All right, guys, that's it for this today. We've covered the Baltic, the Marshall Defense, the symmetrical variation with C5, the Albin Countergambit, the Gregorian, and a few others. But essentially, you just control the center. On a few lines, you may play queen for check. But outside of that, it's pretty easy. So you use this video to help you as you do your homework. All right, talk to you guys later.